Welcome to Skywalker Tales, your nightly escape to a galaxy far, far away. Before we begin tonight's story, drop a comment with your planet and time zone. I love seeing where across the galaxy our listeners are tuning in from. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss tomorrow's journey through the stars. Long before the Jedi Knights flew their shining starfighters across the galaxy, before the Republic even had its first capital on Coruscant, there was darkness. The stars were the same as now, but many of their worlds were wild and untamed. Across the galaxy, strange powers were waking, powers that came from the Force. Some people felt the Force and used it to bring peace and balance. Others used it to grow stronger, to control others, and to feed their pride. In those early days, the galaxy was divided between those who served the light and those who served the dark. The Jedi Order was still young then. They lived simply, studying the Force and keeping peace among the stars. But not everyone agreed on what the Force was meant to be used for. Some believed that the Force should not be limited. They thought that passion, anger, and power were not evil. They were natural. These thinkers started to argue with the other Jedi. The arguments became fights. The fights became wars. Those who wanted to use the Force for power called themselves by a new name, the Dark Jedi. They believed that strength and emotion were the true path to understanding the Force. Peace is a lie, they said. There is only passion. The Dark Jedi fought against the Jedi in terrible wars that tore apart entire worlds. But in the end, the Jedi won. The Dark Jedi were cast out, banished from the Republic, and sent drifting into the unknown parts of the galaxy. Many ships vanished, but a few found a new world far away from the Republic's light, a harsh red planet called Korriban. Korriban was a world of red sand and jagged mountains. Its skies were filled with storms of dust and lightning. The people who lived there were strange and fierce. They were not human. They were the Sith species, tall and red-skinned with sharp teeth and bright yellow eyes. The Sith worshipped the dark side of the Force. They built giant tombs for their kings, carved into the cliffs and mountains, filled with treasures and curses. When the Dark Jedi arrived, the Sith saw them as gods. The Dark Jedi had power unlike anything they had ever known. The Dark Jedi saw a chance. They used their power to rule. Over time, they mixed with the Sith people, becoming their leaders, their kings, and their priests. From that day on, the name Sith no longer meant just a species. It became a title, the name of a dark order that followed the dark side of the Force.
The first Sith Empire was born. The Dark Jedi became Sith Lords, masters of the dark side. They taught their followers that power was the only truth. They built temples and palaces filled with ancient secrets. On Korriban and other dark worlds like Zayast and Dromund Kaas, they studied the ways of the Force. They learned to make powerful weapons and even created creatures born of darkness. Their empire grew strong, but it was hidden, far beyond the reach of the Republic. For 1,000 years, the Sith ruled their dark empire in secret. They did not forget the Jedi who had banished them. They dreamed of revenge. They waited and watched, knowing that someday the Republic would grow weak, and then the Sith would return. Among the Sith Lords, there were always rivalries. Each one wanted to be the most powerful. They fought in the shadows, using lies, poison, and dark magic against one another. Their rule was cruel and full of fear, yet their power kept growing. One of the greatest of these early Sith Lords was Ajunta Pall. He had been one of the first Dark Jedi to fall to the dark side. He became the first Dark Lord of the Sith. Ajunta Pall was wise and powerful, but even he could not control the hunger for power that the dark side created. After he died, his tomb was sealed deep within the Valley of the Dark Lords on Korriban, a place where only the bravest dared to walk, for the spirits of the dead Sith were said to whisper to the living. Over time, other Sith Lords rose to power, like Marka Ragnos, who ruled for 100 years and brought all the Sith clans together under one banner. Mark Aurelius was feared and respected. When he died, his death marked the end of peace among the Sith. The other Dark Lords began to fight again, each one trying to claim the title of Dark Lord. It was during this time that a young Sith named Naga Sadow rose to power. He was clever and ambitious. He studied forbidden Sith sorcery and dreamed of conquering the galaxy. Naga Sadow believed that the Sith should no longer hide. They should take revenge on the Republic and the Jedi who had exiled their ancestors. But not all Sith agreed. Some wanted to keep the Empire safe and secret. When Mark Aurelius died, the Sith gathered on Coruscant to choose his successor. The spirits of the dead were said to rise that night. As the Dark Lords argued, a glowing figure appeared, the ghost of Mark Aurelius himself. He spoke to them, warning that their pride could destroy everything. But his words were ignored. Soon, war broke out among the Sith again. Naga Sadow used trickery to make himself the new Dark Lord. He told the Sith that the Republic was weak and that the time for revenge had come. Using his powers, he created illusions to make the Sith believe they were being attacked by the Republic. Enraged, they followed him into battle. Naga Sadow built a great fleet of warships and led them across the galaxy. He attacked the Republic in what would be known as the Great Hyperspace War. His ships blazed through the stars, powered by strange crystals that glowed with the energy of the dark side. The Republic was taken by surprise. Worlds burned, and Jedi fell in battle. But Naga Sadow's pride became his downfall. He fought not only the Jedi, but also his own people. Another Sith Lord named Ludo Kresh rose against him, saying that Sadow's madness would destroy them all. The Sith fought each other even as they fought the Republic. The war ended in disaster. The Sith fleet was destroyed. Their worlds were bombed and burned. Naga Sadow fled, wounded and defeated. He escaped to a faraway planet called Yavin 4, where he built hidden temples deep in the jungle. There, he planned to wait until the Sith could rise again. But the Sith Empire was shattered. The Republic believed the Sith were gone forever. They were wrong. Centuries passed. The Jedi and the Republic forgot the Sith. But the dark side does not die so easily. On distant worlds, survivors of the Sith Empire hid their knowledge in secret holocrons, strange pyramids that held the voices and memories of ancient Sith Lords. These holocrons whispered to those who found them, teaching them the ways of the dark side. One day, those secrets would be discovered again. And when they were, the Sith would return, more dangerous than ever. For in the shadows of the galaxy, there is always someone who hungers for power. Someone who listens to the whispers of the dark side. Someone who believes that peace is a lie, and that only through passion can true strength be found. That is where the next story begins, with the rediscovery of the Sith and the rise of a new kind of Dark Lord. After the fall of Naga Sadow and the shattering of the ancient Sith Empire, the galaxy seemed peaceful for a long time. The Jedi watched over the Republic, keeping order and teaching young students to follow the light. For centuries, it looked as if the darkness had disappeared forever. The Sith were thought to be nothing more than stories, legends whispered to scare younglings. But the dark side never truly dies. It sleeps, waiting, hiding in shadows, and in the hearts of those who are impatient, ambitious, or angry. The Force is like a river. Even when it seems calm, the current still runs deep. And so, the Sith waited in secret, in hidden tombs and forgotten temples, biding their time. Thousands of years after the Great Hyperspace War, the Sith were rediscovered, not by accident, but by the curiosity of explorers. In the far reaches of the galaxy, on a planet covered with deserts and towering mountains, archaeologists uncovered ruins of an ancient Sith city. Inside were holocrons, devices that recorded the thoughts and knowledge of long-dead Sith Lords. They whispered secrets of power to anyone who could listen. It was during this time that two powerful Jedi fell into temptation. Their names were Exar Kuin and Ulic Qel-Droma. Both were strong in the Force. Both were brave, talented, and admired by their peers. But both were curious about powers the Jedi had forbidden. They sought knowledge not for good, but for understanding and strength. Exar was different from other Jedi. He did not fear the dark side. Instead, he wanted to learn it. He was fascinated by the power of the Sith, and he believed he could master it without losing himself. Ulic Qel-Droma, on the other hand, was more emotional. He cared deeply for his friends and family, and he wanted to use power to protect them. But his desire to help others sometimes turned into anger and pride. Together, Exar and Ulic discovered the lost Sith temples and learned secrets long hidden. They found weapons imbued with the dark side and read the holocrons of ancient Sith lords. Slowly, the dark side began to whisper to them, promising strength, power, and glory. At first, the two Jedi told themselves that they could control it. They were not like the Sith of old. They were heroes of the Republic. But the dark side is cunning. It feeds on desire, fear, and doubt. Exar and Ulic began to change. Their hearts hardened, their thoughts turned darker, and their loyalty to the Jedi began to falter. Eventually, Exar gave himself fully to the dark side. He declared himself a Sith Lord, taking the title of Dark Lord of the Sith, just like the ancient masters. Ulic followed him, drawn by friendship and ambition, and the two became the leaders of a new Sith Empire. But unlike the old empire, this one aimed to conquer the galaxy. Exar was clever and cruel. He created massive armies, using both Sith apprentices and mind-controlled warriors. He mastered the ancient Sith magics, summoning storms and weapons of destruction. Worlds that had never known fear now trembled under his power. Ulic Qel-Droma, once a hero of the Republic, was trapped by his loyalty to Exar. He committed terrible acts in the name of friendship and duty, believing he could still do good. But each battle pulled him further into darkness. The Republic once again faced the rise of the Sith. Jedi across the galaxy fought desperately to stop them. But the Sith were strong, and their knowledge of the Force made them nearly unstoppable. The galaxy was plunged into what would be called the Great Sith War. Star systems burned, entire armies were wiped out, and fear spread like fire. During this war, the Jedi learned an important truth. The Sith are not just warriors. They are students of darkness. They study history, they plan, they wait for the right moment. They use fear and deception as skillfully as any lightsaber. And they are patient. Eventually, Ulic Qel-Droma began to see the truth. The dark side had tricked him. It had used his friendship with Exar to control him. He realized the terrible crimes he had committed, and he fought to redeem himself. In a final desperate battle, Ulic was defeated, captured by the Jedi, and brought back to the light. But the damage had been done. The Sith Empire under Exar had spread across countless worlds, leaving death and destruction in its wake. Exar, however, was not finished. Unlike other Sith, he was not content to rule for a short time. He learned a secret of immortality from the ancient Sith holocrons. When he faced defeat, he performed a forbidden ritual, binding his spirit to a temple on Yavin 4. His body was destroyed, but his essence lingered, waiting for new apprentices to come and serve him. In the shadows, Exar became a legend. Jedi who trained on Yavin 4 would later speak of strange voices in the ruins, voices that promised power but demanded loyalty. Some Jedi were tempted. Others fled in terror. The Great Sith War ended with the Republic victorious, but at a terrible cost. Entire worlds were scarred, families destroyed, and the galaxy reminded that the dark side is never truly gone. The Jedi had learned that the Sith could return, no matter how many centuries passed. And the Sith had learned that patience and cunning could make them stronger than ever. From that time on, the Sith became more careful. They no longer built massive empires that could be easily destroyed. They hid, plotting in secret, waiting for the right moment to strike. And so began the long period of secrecy that would eventually lead to legends like Darth Revan and Darth Malak, Sith Lords who would test the Republic in ways no one had imagined. The story of the Sith is a story of hunger, not for food, but for power, control, and mastery of the Force. It is a story of temptation, friendship twisted into betrayal, and the consequences of seeking strength without wisdom. And it is far from over. In the shadows of the galaxy, whispers of the dark side continued. Temples, holocrons, and tombs waited for new explorers. Young Jedi and ambitious warriors could stumble upon them and fall into darkness, just as Exar Kun had done. And so the cycle of the Sith continued across centuries, across worlds, across the endless stars. Somewhere out there, new Sith Lords were being born, learning the lessons of their ancient masters, preparing to rise when the time was right. And the galaxy, for all its beauty and peace, would once again tremble under the shadow of the dark side. Long after the time of Exar Kun, the galaxy had grown peaceful once again. The Republic had rebuilt after the Great Sith War. Jedi trained young students in the ways of the Force, teaching them patience, discipline, and the importance of defending the galaxy. Peace lasted for a time, but the dark side never truly sleeps. It waits quietly, like a shadow just beyond sight, ready to reach out to those who are tempted. On the outer edges of the galaxy, far from the shining core worlds of the Republic, threat stirred. Pirates, criminals, and warlords threatened the outer systems. And in the shadows, ancient Sith teachings waited to be discovered. Some Jedi, eager to fight injustice, ventured into these unknown regions. Among them were two extraordinary friends, Revan and Malak. Revan was brilliant. He was a natural leader, strong in the Force, and admired by everyone who knew him. Malak, his closest friend, was fierce and loyal, with unmatched courage and skill in battle. Together, they led missions to defend the Republic, fighting off pirates, raiders, and rogue warlords. Their names became legends among the stars. But even heroes can fall. During one mission, Revan and Malak discovered something terrible. The existence of the Sith, long thought destroyed. Ancient Sith warships, powerful artifacts, and dark holocrons revealed secrets the Jedi had forgotten. Revan studied them in secret, learning the ways of the dark side, not to destroy, but to understand. At first, it was curiosity, then ambition. Slowly, the dark side began to whisper to him, offering power beyond imagining. Malak followed his friend, trusting Revan completely. Together, they made a choice that would change the galaxy forever. They turned to the dark side. Revan became a Sith Lord, calling himself Darth Revan, and Malak became his apprentice, Darth Malak. As Sith, they were unlike any before them. Revan was a brilliant strategist, a master of both lightsaber combat and the Force. Malak was a terrifying warrior, ruthless and unstoppable in battle. Together, they formed a new Sith empire, building a massive fleet in secret and recruiting other followers who had been seduced by power. Their plan was simple but terrifying: to conquer the Republic, destroy the Jedi, and remake the galaxy in their image. Revan and Malak unleashed a war across the stars, attacking worlds, destroying fleets, and striking fear into the hearts of all who opposed them. This conflict became known as the Jedi Civil War, a time when brother fought against brother, and darkness nearly consumed the galaxy. Revan and Malak were not just warriors, they were brilliant in strategy. They studied the Republic's weaknesses, used spies and deception, and moved their forces like pieces on a chessboard. Whole planets fell before their power. Jedi Knights, the protectors of peace, found themselves hunted. Many fell to the dark side, either through fear or temptation. Yet even in the darkness, there were heroes. One Jedi, guided by the light and aided by allies from across the galaxy, began to fight back. Slowly, Revan's plans began to unravel. In the heat of battle, something unexpected happened. Revan himself was captured. The Jedi, using a mysterious power, wiped his memory. His past as a Sith was erased, leaving only his skills, courage, and heart. Now confused, Revan returned to the Republic as a Jedi once more, unaware of the terrible crimes he had committed. He worked with the Republic to defeat Malak, who had become the new Dark Lord after a terrible betrayal. Malak had grown cruel and monstrous, even by Sith standards. He replaced his jaw with a metal prosthetic after a battle scarred him, making him look more terrifying than ever. Together, Revan and the Jedi fought Malak in a final, desperate battle aboard his flagship. The warships clashed, lightsabers blazed, and the Force surged like never before. In the end, Revan faced Malak in single combat. The battle was long and fierce, but Revan's skill and determination won. He defeated Malak, ending the Jedi Civil War and saving the galaxy, at least for a time. But the story of Revan and Malak did not end there. Even after defeat, Revan's connection to the dark side remained. His memory eventually returned, and he had to face the consequences of his actions. Revan became a symbol of balance, a Jedi who had fallen, learned, and returned to the light, showing that even the strongest can be tempted, and even the darkest can find redemption. The Sith, however, were not gone. Revan's rise and fall proved a dangerous truth. The dark side always finds a way to survive. Ancient holocrons, Sith artifacts, and forgotten temples continued to whisper across the galaxy, waiting for new apprentices. New Sith lords would rise, learning from the mistakes of the past and seeking power stronger than ever. The tale of Revan and Malak became a warning. Heroes can fall, friends can betray, and power can be more dangerous than any enemy. But it was also a story of hope, that even in the darkest times, light can return and balance can be restored. As the galaxy rebuilt itself after the Jedi Civil War, whispers of the Sith continued. In distant worlds and hidden corners of the galaxy, new dark apprentices listened to the teachings of the past. The cycle continued. The rise and fall of Sith lords, the struggle between light and dark, the eternal battle for control of the Force. And somewhere in the shadows, the Force waited. Waiting for the next great story, the next great war, the next heroes and villains who would shape the destiny of the galaxy. After Darth Bane created the Rule of Two, the galaxy changed forever. The Sith were no longer numerous, fighting among themselves openly. Instead, they became a hidden force, lurking in the shadows, patient and cunning. For centuries, the Jedi thought the Sith were extinct. They had forgotten how dangerous the dark side could be, believing that the ancient wars were long over. But the dark side never truly dies. It waits for those who are strong, ambitious, or curious. New Sith lords arose, each taking a master or apprentice, each learning the ways of the Force in secret. They studied the old holocrons, learned from the mistakes of ancient Sith like Naga Sadow and Exar Kun, and plotted for the future. One generation after Darth Bane, a Sith named Darth Cognis took power. She was known not for her fighting skills, but for her cunning. She taught her apprentices how to survive in secrecy, how to manipulate others, and how to use the galaxy's politics as a weapon. Under her guidance, the Sith became more patient than ever. They no longer sought open war. Instead, they whispered, guided, and influenced from the shadows, learning to wait for the perfect moment. Centuries passed. One Sith would die, and another would rise. Each apprentice learned more than the last, growing stronger in the dark side. Among these successors, some became legends for their cruelty and skill, while others remained unknown, their names whispered only in secret holocrons. The Jedi, though vigilant, never realized how many Sith were still alive. By the time of the later Old Republic, two Sith lords became especially important, Darth Ruin and Darth Traya. These Sith were not just warriors, they were teachers, philosophers, and schemers. They studied the history of the Sith and the Jedi, learning from past wars and understanding that knowledge was as powerful as a lightsaber. They trained their apprentices carefully, preparing them to continue the cycle of the Rule of Two. Some Sith began to experiment with the Force in dangerous ways. They learned to twist it, bend it, and even try to use it to cheat death. Others explored forgotten worlds, searching for ancient artifacts and weapons from the time of the old Sith empires. Each generation grew stronger, and the Sith's power slowly spread, unseen by the Jedi or the Republic. Even though they were hidden, the Sith influenced events across the galaxy. Wars in the Outer Rim, mysterious disappearances of planets, and sudden political crises were often the work of dark side manipulation. The Rule of Two ensured that the Sith could strike without exposing themselves to the Jedi's full power. One master and one apprentice, passing secrets and waiting for the perfect moment. This strategy made them nearly unstoppable. Yet, the Sith were not invincible. Each generation faced challenges, both from within and from outside. Apprentices sometimes tried to betray their masters too early. Masters sometimes failed to pass on their knowledge correctly. And occasionally, heroes arose who could sense the dark side and fight back. But the Sith always survived, learning from each mistake, growing stronger with patience and cunning. During this era, Sith influence became more subtle but far-reaching. They studied the Republic's leaders, learning their weaknesses. They observed the Jedi, understanding their rules, their fears, and their strengths. By remaining hidden, the Sith ensured that when the time was right, they could return with power no one could stop. The galaxy, unaware of this hidden threat, enjoyed a fragile peace. Systems rebuilt, trade flourished, and the Jedi trained new generations of protectors. But the shadow of the Sith was always there, patiently waiting. Every Sith Lord, from Bane to the latest apprentice, knew that one day the galaxy would tremble again. And when it did, the Sith would be ready. The story of the Sith is not just a story of battles and wars. It is a story of patience, cunning, and survival. Unlike the Jedi, who fight openly and seek justice, the Sith work in the shadows, manipulating events over centuries. They understand that power is not just about strength in combat, but about knowledge, strategy, and the ability to wait for the perfect moment. The old Republic eventually fell, but the Sith remained hidden. Their teachings survived through centuries, passed down from master to apprentice, each learning from the mistakes and successes of the past. The galaxy may have thought the Sith were gone, but they were never gone. They were always waiting, hidden in plain sight, planning for the day when the rule of two would bring them back to power. And that day would come. The shadows of the Sith stretched across the galaxy, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. From the ruins of ancient empires to the forgotten temples of Coruscant, the Sith waited patiently, ensuring that when the time came, they would return stronger than ever. The story of the Sith is far from over. Each new generation of masters and apprentices carries the lessons of the past. Each dark secret learned, each manipulation perfected, each battle won or lost builds toward the day when the Sith will rise again, and the galaxy will remember the true meaning of fear, power, and darkness. The old Republic may have survived wars and heroes, but the Sith endured, and the dark side, patient and cunning, waited in the shadows, ready to reclaim its place among the stars. Part 5 sets the stage for the transition from the old Republic to the time of the movies, showing how the Sith survived through centuries of secrecy and manipulation, eventually leading to the rise of Darth Sidious and the events of the Galactic Empire. After centuries of surviving in secret, the Sith had perfected the rule of two. One master and one apprentice carried the power of the dark side, each generation growing stronger and wiser than the last. The Jedi continued to believe that the Sith were extinct, unaware that a single pair of Sith Lords could shape events across the galaxy in ways no army could. In these final centuries before the fall of the Republic, the Sith became experts in patience. They no longer fought open wars like Naga Sadow or Exarchuan. Instead, they moved quietly, influencing politicians, trade leaders, and even Jedi from afar. They used fear, deception, and manipulation to gain power, knowing that when the time was right, they could strike with devastating effect. One of the most important aspects of this era was the preparation for the eventual return of the Sith as a dominant force. The Sith spread across the galaxy in secret, training apprentices and establishing hidden temples. Some of these temples contained ancient knowledge from the old Sith Empire, while others held advanced teachings from Darth Bane himself. Each generation studied the failures of the past, learning from mistakes, and ensuring that the Sith would never be caught unprepared again. Masters trained their apprentices not just in combat, but in cunning, politics, and strategy. They understood that raw power alone was not enough. The Jedi could sense strength in the Force, but they could not always see the hidden manipulation of events. The Sith used this to their advantage, creating crises that appeared natural or accidental, while secretly shaping outcomes to serve their purposes. During this time, some Sith explored forgotten technologies and weapons. They sought to combine the dark side with machinery, warships, and even ancient superweapons. They studied holocrons, Sith alchemy, and forbidden sorcery. Each new discovery made them stronger, more dangerous, and more cunning. But always, they remained hidden, following the rule of two. The Jedi noticed some disturbances in the Force, mysterious whispers of darkness, unexplained disappearances, and strange disturbances in the Outer Rim. Some Jedi investigated and discovered fragments of Sith teachings, but they never found the full scope of the threat. By design, the Sith left only enough traces to draw curious Jedi in, tempting them, testing their strength, and sometimes turning them toward the dark side. It was during this era that some of the most famous Sith began their training. Masters took apprentices who would eventually become key figures in the galaxy's future. Each apprentice was tested, pushed to their limits, and taught that betrayal and cunning were tools of survival. Unlike earlier Sith, who fought among themselves openly, these apprentices learned patience. They learned to hide, to plan, and to strike only when victory was certain. The Sith also learned to use the Republic itself as a weapon. They whispered to senators, influenced political decisions, and created conflicts that weakened the government from within. Wars and rebellions were no longer random. They were carefully orchestrated to create chaos and mistrust. Jedi, who focused on external threats, rarely noticed the subtle manipulations shaping the galaxy. One of the most famous Sith masters during this time was Darth Plagueis, who studied ways to manipulate life itself through the Force. Plagueis sought immortality and power over death, experimenting with techniques that could influence midichlorians, the tiny life forms connected to the Force. His apprentice, Darth Sidious, would later carry these teachings to a new level, using patience, secrecy, and cunning to rise from the shadows and ultimately destroy the Republic from within. The final centuries before the fall of the Republic demonstrated the full power of the rule of two. Unlike the Sith of old, there were never open wars between Sith. Every master ensured the survival of the Order, teaching the apprentice all they knew and preparing them for the moment when they would take the mantle. Each Sith generation grew stronger, smarter, and deadlier, all while remaining hidden from the Jedi and the galaxy at large. By the time the Republic reached its peak, the Sith were ready. They had infiltrated governments, trade organizations, and even military forces. They had mastered ancient Sith teachings, sorcery, and advanced technology. They were patient, cunning, and invisible. The galaxy believed it was at peace, but in reality, it was sitting on the edge of darkness. And then came the moment when patience became action. The Sith, led by a master and apprentice, would finally rise openly. They would use everything they had learned over thousands of years, from the ancient empires of Coruscant to the cunning of Darth Bane, to strike at the heart of the Republic and the Jedi. The galaxy would tremble under their power, and the final act of the Sith's long plan would begin. The story of the old Republic's Sith Lords had come full circle. From the Dark Jedi, who fled to Coruscant, to the rise and fall of great empires, to Revan and Malak, and finally to Darth Bane and the rule of two, the Sith had survived. They had learned, adapted, and waited. And when the time came, they would emerge from the shadows, stronger than ever before, to reshape the galaxy in darkness. The stage was set. The Sith had waited for millennia. And now, the time had come for the galaxy to remember the true power of the dark side. After thousands of years of planning, patience, and training, the Sith were ready to act. For centuries, they had followed the rule of two, surviving in secret, growing stronger with each generation. Masters had trained apprentices, teaching them the lessons of the past and preparing them to strike when the time was right. The galaxy believed the Sith were extinct, but they were very much alive, and their power had been quietly growing, hidden in shadows. By this time, the Sith had infiltrated every corner of the galaxy. They influenced politicians, trade guilds, and military leaders. They created conflicts designed to weaken the Republic from within. Jedi, who had faced wars and betrayals before, could sense disturbances in the Force, but could not understand their full scope. The Sith's patience and cunning made them invisible and unstoppable. Among the Sith of this era, one master rose above all, Darth Plagueis. He was obsessed with knowledge and power. He studied the Force to manipulate life itself, trying to create immortality and bend reality to his will. Plagueis trained an apprentice in secret, a young senator from Naboo, who would later become one of the greatest Sith in history, Darth Sidious. Darth Sidious, also known as Chief Palpatine, learned everything from Plagueis. He mastered the Force, politics, and manipulation. He understood how to hide his dark side, pretending to be a humble servant of the Republic, while secretly plotting its destruction. When Sidious finally killed Plagueis in his sleep, as the rule of two demanded, he became the master, and the galaxy would soon feel the full weight of his power. Sidious moved carefully. He built alliances, influenced elections, and created crises that required the Republic to react. He orchestrated wars in the Outer Rim, drawing the Jedi into conflicts that would weaken them and divide their order. He created the Clone Wars, manipulating both sides to serve his plans. Every move was precise, every battle part of a greater design. Meanwhile, Sidious trained an apprentice in secret, a young man named Anakin Skywalker. Anakin was strong in the Force, brave and skilled, but he was also impulsive and filled with fear of loss. Sidious sensed this and used it to his advantage. He taught Anakin the dark side in secret, promising power to save the people he loved. Slowly, Anakin was drawn toward the darkness. The Jedi Order, distracted by war and growing political chaos, failed to notice Sidious's full plan. They suspected danger, but they could not see the Sith hiding in plain sight. Sidious had studied their ways, learned their rules, and planned every move carefully. By the time the Jedi realized the truth, it was almost too late. Anakin, now fully turned to the dark side, became Darth Vader, Sidious's apprentice and enforcer. Together, they executed the final stage of the Sith's plan. Sidious declared himself Emperor, dissolving the Republic and creating the Galactic Empire. Jedi across the galaxy were hunted down, betrayed by the systems they protected. Thousands fell, and the Order was nearly destroyed. The Sith had finally achieved what ancient Sith like Naga Sadow Exarkuan and Revan had dreamed of, total control of the galaxy. But unlike the old empires that rose and fell in open war, Sidious's power was absolute because of secrecy, cunning, and patience. He had learned from Darth Bane's rule of two that survival depended on patience, knowledge, and manipulation rather than brute force alone. Under Sidious and Vader, the galaxy was reshaped. Worlds that had resisted the Republic now obeyed the Empire. Fear and oppression replaced freedom. The Jedi were gone, scattered, or in hiding. Yet the rule of two remained in effect. Sidious, the master, taught Vader, the apprentice, knowing that one day the apprentice might challenge the master, as the rule of two required. Even in the darkest times, the Sith's long history shaped their success. Every lesson from the old Republic, the mistakes of Naga Sadow, the ambition of Exarkuan, the cunning of Revan and Malak, and the wisdom of Darth Bane, was reflected in Sidious's rise. The Sith had survived not through brute force alone, but through careful planning, manipulation, and the patience of centuries. But the story of the Sith was never truly finished. The rule of two ensured that the apprentice would eventually rise, the master would fall, and the cycle of darkness would continue. Even as Sidious ruled the galaxy with Darth Vader at his side, new threats, new apprentices, and new heroes waited in the shadows. The galaxy was never safe, for the Sith endure as long as the dark side of the Force exists. The old Republic's Sith had finally achieved their ultimate goal. Hidden, patient, and unstoppable, they had returned to dominate the galaxy. From the first Dark Jedi who fled to Korriban to the cunning of Darth Sidious, the Sith had survived thousands of years, learning, adapting, and waiting. And through it all, one truth remained. The dark side never dies. It only waits. And somewhere in the shadows, the next apprentice awaited. Even after the fall of the Galactic Empire, The Sith's shadow never truly disappeared. The galaxy believed that the dark times were over, that the reign of Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader was the end of the Sith. Jedi who had survived in secret rebuilt their order, and the Republic began to restore peace and stability. But the Sith were patient. They had survived thousands of years of wars, betrayals, and near destruction. The rule of two ensured their survival, passing knowledge from master to apprentice, each generation learning from the mistakes and victories of the past. The fall of Sidious and Vader did not mean the end of the dark side. Darth Sidious had carefully planned for contingencies. Even after his death, secret apprentices, loyal followers, and hidden Sith cults waited quietly, practicing the ancient teachings in isolation. The galaxy, unaware of their existence, focused on rebuilding, but far from the core worlds, in hidden temples. Dark holocrons recorded the teachings of the Sith, waiting for those strong enough to discover them. Some Sith sought revenge, while others were focused on survival. They understood the mistakes of the past, ambition without caution, rage without patience, and striking too soon. They studied the history of Naga Sadow, Exar-Kun, Revan, Malak, Darth Bane, and Sidious, learning from the triumphs and failures of every Sith who had come before. Their power was not always seen in battle. It was measured in secrecy, cunning, and the ability to influence events without revealing themselves. One such follower of the Sith was a dark acolyte who called himself Darth Xana's distant apprentice, in secret teachings passed down across generations. Hidden in remote regions of the unknown regions, this Sith studied ancient Sith alchemy and sorcery. He learned how to hide in the Force, how to influence others subtly, and how to manipulate entire systems without revealing his presence. From these teachings, he began to gather other dark side users, forming a network of loyal followers and apprentices. Meanwhile, scattered Sith cults and secret orders persisted across the galaxy. On planets like Carbon, Moraband, and Zyast, Sith temples that had survived for thousands of years became centers of power. Sith acolytes studied in secrecy, learning the ways of the dark side, practicing lightsaber combat, and mastering Sith sorcery. They trained in isolation, following the rule of two in principle, if not always in strict form, preparing for the day they could rise openly once more. These Sith learned patience, knowing that the galaxy was not ready for their return. They studied the new Jedi Order, observing their tactics, leadership, and philosophy. They noted the mistakes of the New Republic, its bureaucracy, and its vulnerability to manipulation. Like Sidious before them, they learned that the best weapon was not brute force, but subtlety, deception, and patience. They waited for the perfect moment when chaos, weakness, or ambition could be exploited to their advantage. The legacy of the Sith was also evident in their ability to manipulate others. Over the centuries, they discovered that fear and temptation were more powerful than swords or armies. Apprentices learned to exploit the weaknesses of others, using the Force to influence emotions, twist desires, and corrupt loyalty. Even the Jedi were not immune. Tales of fallen Jedi, seduced by promises of power, continued to surface long after the time of Revan and Malak. The Sith learned that sometimes the most powerful weapon was not a fleet or a lightsaber, but the mind of an unsuspecting hero. During this period, one Sith rose in secret to claim mastery over the dark side, a figure known in whispers as Darth Krayt, though his true origins were shrouded in mystery. He studied the failures of Sidious and Vader, realizing that the Sith could not simply rule through fear alone. Krayt believed that the rule of two, while effective for survival, limited the potential of the dark side. He envisioned a new order, one in which many Sith could operate in secrecy, manipulating the galaxy from hidden positions. His teachings were radical, blending Sith philosophy with strategic mastery of politics and war. Darth Krayt's followers operated in secret, influencing trade routes, political leaders, and entire star systems. They did not reveal themselves openly, but their presence could be felt in subtle shifts of power, mysterious disappearances, and unexplained disasters. Through their influence, the Sith ensured that the galaxy remained in a state of instability, ready for exploitation when the time was right. Even as these Sith worked in secrecy, the Force continued to flow through the galaxy, connecting Jedi and Sith alike. The dark side whispered to those who were ambitious or curious, while the light side called to the brave and selfless. The struggle between light and dark was eternal, and the legacy of the Sith ensured that no victory by the Jedi could ever be permanent. The galaxy was a living chessboard, and the Sith were masters of strategy, always several moves ahead of their opponents. Some Sith sought more than survival. They sought immortality, understanding, and mastery over the Force itself. They experimented with ancient Sith sorcery, trying to bind their spirits to objects, use life energy to extend their lives, or even create Force-sensitive armies. Their experiments often failed, but some succeeded in ways that allowed them to leave lasting legacies. Holocrons, artifacts, and hidden temples became vessels for knowledge, ensuring that the Sith's teachings could survive for thousands of years beyond the death of any master or apprentice. The Sith also realized that alliances could be tools, not weaknesses. By manipulating politics, trade, and war, they ensured that powerful individuals, systems, and even entire factions could act as unwitting agents of the dark side. Jedi who pursued justice, leaders who sought power, and soldiers who fought bravely were all instruments to be used or destroyed, depending on the Sith's goals. Through subtle influence, the Sith multiplied their reach far beyond what two individuals could achieve alone. Despite their secrecy, the Sith were not without conflict. Rivalries sometimes emerged among apprentices, and ambition occasionally led to betrayal. The rule of two ensured that the master's power was supreme, but cunning apprentices sometimes challenged the rules in small ways, testing their limits and preparing for the eventual moment when they might rise to supremacy. Each conflict was a lesson, refining the tactics, strategies, and philosophies of the Sith. By the time the galaxy had entered a new era of peace and rebuilding, the Sith had perfected the art of patience. They understood that sudden strikes could fail, that exposure could lead to destruction, and that the greatest victories were those that appeared as chance or accident. The dark side had become a force of subtlety as much as strength, shaping events without revealing its hand. The legacy of the Sith also extended to the myths and stories that persisted across the galaxy. Tales of ancient Sith lords like Naga Sadow, Exar Kun, Revan, and Malak were preserved in holocrons and texts, studied secretly by those who dared to seek the dark side. These stories inspired ambition, taught caution, and provided blueprints for power. The Sith understood the importance of history, knowing that each victory and defeat could be studied and exploited by future generations. Even after the Old Republic's fall and the apparent defeat of the Sith under Darth Sidious and Darth Vader, the dark side of the Force never truly disappeared. The galaxy believed that the Sith were gone, defeated along with the Empire, and that the Jedi had restored balance. But this belief was a dangerous illusion. The Sith had survived for thousands of years, hidden from the eyes of the galaxy, and their patient strategy ensured that they could always rise again. The centuries following the fall of the Empire were times of rebuilding. The New Republic emerged, attempting to restore the ideals of democracy, freedom, and justice. Jedi returned from exile, training new generations of students and spreading hope across the galaxy. But the Sith had long since learned that overt power and open war were dangerous. They had studied the failures of Naga Sadow, Exar Kun, Revan, Malak, and Sidious, understanding that patience, cunning, and secrecy were the ultimate weapons. In these centuries, the Sith continued to operate in the shadows. They no longer needed to build massive armies, fleets, or empires to exert influence. Instead, they used subtlety. They manipulated events from afar, guided politicians, and corrupted leaders without ever revealing themselves. Every rebellion, every economic collapse, and every mysterious disaster could be traced back, in some way, to the subtle interference of a hidden Sith. One of the key lessons the Sith had learned was that power could be multiplied through influence. While the rule of two ensured that the core of the Sith remained strong and focused, the Sith also trained cults, secret academies, and loyal followers across the galaxy. These groups were not true Sith in the rule of two sense, but they acted as extensions of the dark side, spreading chaos, fear, and ambition while the master and apprentice remained hidden. These networks allowed the Sith to manipulate events far beyond the reach of two individuals. Some of these secret groups operated in the unknown regions, exploring uncharted planets, ancient ruins, and forgotten systems. They discovered relics of the ancient Sith Empire, holocrons of masters like Exarchuan and Revan, and texts containing forbidden knowledge. Apprentices trained in these locations developed skills that rivaled those of the Jedi, including mastery of force manipulation, advanced lightsaber combat, and even Sith sorcery. The dark side, through these hidden networks, ensured its survival and growth. During this period, the Sith were not only surviving, they were adapting. They learned to exploit the weaknesses of the galaxy: corruption, greed, fear, and ambition. They understood that power could be gained not just through combat, but through politics, economics, and deception. Systems that appeared peaceful were often shaped by Sith influence behind the scenes, with decisions subtly guided toward outcomes that served the dark side. Wars, trade disputes, and political crises were all tools in the hands of patient Sith plotting generations-long strategies. Some Sith apprentices became particularly adept at this subtle manipulation. They infiltrated the highest levels of government, convincing senators, governors, and military leaders to act in ways that advanced the Sith agenda. Others became industrialists, financiers, and strategists, using wealth and commerce to influence entire star systems. By the time the galaxy realized something was amiss, the Sith were already several steps ahead, their presence invisible to all but the most sensitive in the Force. Despite their patience, the Sith also continued to test the strength of their apprentices. Every apprentice was trained in combat, tactics, and strategy, but also in manipulation and cunning. Loyalty was tested, betrayal was expected, and survival often required difficult choices. Through these trials, the Sith ensured that each generation of master and apprentice was stronger and more dangerous than the last. Only the strongest survived, following the rule of two, while other acolytes and followers served as instruments to extend the Sith's reach. In this era, many Jedi were unaware of the Sith's continued influence. Some sensed disturbances in the Force, moments of anger, fear, or ambition that seemed unnatural, but could not trace them to a source. Stories persisted of Force-sensitive individuals being tempted toward darkness or acting in ways that were mysterious and violent. These incidents were often isolated, carefully orchestrated by Sith manipulators to weaken the Jedi subtly over time, without provoking open conflict. One particularly influential Sith during these centuries was a master known as Darth Vitiate, also called the Sith Emperor in some records. Vitiate represented the culmination of the Sith's patient philosophy. He understood the power of manipulation, the importance of secrecy, and the need for patience. He studied ancient Sith techniques, holocrons, and the mistakes of previous generations, perfecting methods to extend life, dominate minds, and control the galaxy's events from the shadows. Vitiate and his apprentices built a network of influence that stretched across the unknown regions and even into the New Republic's core worlds. They used dark side rituals to manipulate populations, create loyal followers, and even absorb the life energy of entire planets to increase their own power. Vitiate's approach was not direct conquest, as in the wars of the past. It was long-term domination, quietly corrupting and reshaping the galaxy to serve the dark side. The rule of two remained central to the Sith's philosophy during these centuries, ensuring that knowledge, power, and ambition were concentrated in a single master-apprentice pair. This allowed the Sith to avoid the infighting that had destroyed their predecessors, like Naga Sadow and the ancient Sith empires. The master would always hold ultimate authority, teaching the apprentice all they knew, while the apprentice waited for the right moment to surpass the master and continue the cycle. This method ensured that the Sith were always growing stronger and more dangerous over time. Yet the Sith were also cautious. They understood the mistakes of Sidious, whose overconfidence nearly cost him everything during the rise of the Rebel Alliance. They learned that open war exposed them to unnecessary risk. By remaining hidden, they could manipulate events without being detected, shaping wars, economies, and governments while remaining invisible. Their influence became like a web across the galaxy, with threads in every system, every fleet, and every leadership position, all carefully controlled by Sith strategy. Even as the Sith worked in secrecy, they were aware of the Jedi's efforts to rebuild and maintain balance. The Jedi were vigilant, training students, monitoring disturbances in the Force, and protecting the galaxy. But the Sith understood that direct confrontation was not always necessary. By influencing events from the shadows, they could weaken the Jedi without ever revealing themselves. Jedi might fight and win battles, unaware that the greater war had already been lost in subtle manipulation, seduction, and corruption orchestrated by the Sith. The story of the Sith is not a story with a clear ending. Unlike empires that rise and fall or Jedi orders that build and rebuild, the Sith endure because they are more than individuals. They are a philosophy, a way of life, a path through the Force that thrives on ambition, power, and cunning. From the earliest Dark Jedi, who fled to Coruscant, to the secretive masters and apprentices who survived the fall of the Galactic Empire, the Sith have always waited, patient and invisible, for the moment when the galaxy is ready to be reshaped in darkness. Even after the apparent end of the Empire, Sith influence remained. Hidden apprentices trained in forgotten temples, cults operated in secret across the galaxy, and ancient holocrons preserved the teachings of countless generations. Every Sith learned from the mistakes and successes of the past, building on the strategies of masters like Naga Sadow, Exarchuan, Revan, Darth Bane, Darth Sidious, and Darth Vader. The galaxy may have believed the Sith were defeated, but in truth, they were simply waiting for the right time to strike again. The rule of two remained central to their survival. Though the galaxy may have assumed it was a relic of the past, it endured as the foundation of Sith power. The master held ultimate authority, teaching the apprentice all they knew, while the apprentice prepared, learned, and waited for the moment to surpass the master. This cycle ensured that each generation of Sith was stronger, more cunning, and more dangerous than the last. It was a system designed not just to survive, but to dominate the galaxy when the time was right. Over centuries, the Sith adapted their methods. Open war was no longer always necessary. Subtle manipulation became their preferred tool. Political systems, trade networks, and even Jedi councils could be influenced or corrupted without revealing the Sith's hand. Wars could be orchestrated to weaken key systems. Leaders could be guided toward decisions that played into the Sith's plans, and entire populations could be swayed by fear, ambition, or desperation, all without a single lightsaber being drawn. In the shadows, Sith apprentices studied the galaxy, learning patience and strategy. They explored ancient ruins, seeking holocrons left by masters long gone. They practiced Sith sorcery, experimented with advanced uses of the Force, and discovered hidden techniques for control, domination, and survival. Every success and failure from the past was recorded and analyzed. From Revan and Malak to Darth Bane and Sidious, each lesson became a building block for future generations. One key aspect of the Sith's philosophy was the understanding that true power came from control over oneself, over others, and over events across the galaxy. While Jedi relied on discipline, morality, and selflessness, the Sith embraced ambition, passion, and cunning. They recognized that strength alone was not enough. Knowledge, patience, and the ability to manipulate others were equally important. This understanding allowed them to survive when countless others failed. Even as the Jedi rebuilt after the fall of the Empire, they remained vulnerable. New generations of Jedi, though skilled and brave, could never fully understand the patient and subtle ways the Sith operated. While Jedi were trained to act with honor and morality, the Sith were trained to anticipate, deceive, and outmaneuver. Jedi victories, though heroic, could not always counter centuries of hidden planning. The Sith's influence stretched far beyond the battlefield, shaping events in ways the Jedi could not immediately perceive. During this time, the galaxy saw new conflicts. Wars erupted in the Outer Rim, political crises destabilized major systems, and rumors of mysterious dark side users began to circulate. Some of these were the work of the Sith, acting through apprentices and cults. Others were independent force-sensitive individuals drawn to the dark side, tempted by whispers of power, revenge, or immortality. The Sith recognized these individuals as potential apprentices, selecting only those strong enough to survive and serve the ultimate goals of the dark side. Apprentices trained in isolation, learning not just combat and force mastery, but manipulation, strategy, and survival. They were tested constantly, for betrayal, ambition, and cunning were expected. Only the strongest survived to challenge the master when the time was right. This constant testing ensured that every Sith generation grew stronger than the last, able to survive disasters, defeat enemies, and continue the cycle of the rule of two. The influence of the Sith extended into unexpected areas. They infiltrated trade networks, influenced education, and manipulated entire populations. Every system, planet, or organization could be a tool in their hands. Subtle guidance could lead a system to war, collapse, or corruption, all serving the ultimate goals of the dark side. Jedi who attempted to intervene often fought symptoms of Sith manipulation rather than the source itself, unaware that the true threat lay hidden behind layers of planning and deception. Ancient teachings continued to guide them. Holocrons from Sith long gone preserved knowledge of combat, philosophy, sorcery, and manipulation. From Naga Sado's conquest to Exar Kuan's betrayal, from Revan's rise and fall to Darth Bane's establishment of the Rule of Two, every lesson was studied and applied. Sith apprentices learned that patience, secrecy, and cunning were just as critical as strength or ambition. Every action, whether in public or hidden, was a step toward survival and ultimate power. The Sith also understood the importance of secrecy and the manipulation of belief. While the galaxy may have believed the Sith were extinct, their influence quietly shaped events. The systems that appeared peaceful were often subtly guided toward decisions that strengthened the dark side. Jedi who sensed disturbances might investigate, but the true source remained hidden. Fear, ambition, and desire could be exploited to create agents of the dark side, extending the influence of a master far beyond what two individuals could achieve alone. Even in isolation, Sith apprentices could affect the galaxy. A single force-sensitive individual, trained in secret, could manipulate local leaders, create rebellions, or sow chaos on a planet. When coordinated with other hidden Sith agents, these actions could ripple across star systems, weakening the Republic, challenging the Jedi, or preparing for larger, future conflicts. The Rule of Two ensured that ultimate control remained with the master and apprentice, but their influence extended across generations and regions, shaping the galaxy without ever revealing the Sith's presence. The cycle of the Sith, master and apprentice, continued unbroken. Each generation learned from the failures of the last, adapted to the galaxy's changing conditions, and prepared for the eventual return to power. Patience, secrecy, and cunning ensured that even apparent defeat was never permanent. The Sith had survived empires, wars, betrayals, and nearly the extinction of their order, and they would endure as long as there were beings willing to embrace the dark side.
Long before the galaxy knew the names of Darth Sidious or Darth Vader, there existed a civilization ruled by power, ambition, and darkness, the Sith species. These beings lived on the planet Korriban, a world steeped in the dark side of the Force. Its deserts were littered with ancient tombs of long-dead Sith lords, each a reminder of the might and danger of the dark side. From these ancient beginnings, the Sith would rise, fall, and rise again, shaping galactic history for thousands of years. The earliest Sith were not always the dark side users the galaxy feared. They were a proud, cunning species with natural abilities in the Force, capable of influencing emotions, commanding loyalty, and manipulating energy. When Dark Jedi, those who had been exiled from the Jedi Order for their embrace of hatred, anger, or forbidden knowledge, discovered Korriban, they encountered the Sith species and saw an opportunity. These exiles, seeking to survive after being cast out of the Republic, allied themselves with the native Sith and taught them the ways of the dark side. This fusion of Force-sensitive exiles and the Sith species gave birth to the first Sith Empire. Under the guidance of these dark Jedi, the Sith learned the secrets of the Force that the Jedi would never teach. They discovered the power of hatred, the strength of ambition, and the ability to dominate others through fear. They built cities, created armies, and learned to combine sorcery with technology to expand their influence across star systems. The Sith of this era were powerful, cunning, and ruthless. They did not merely fight with lightsabers. They studied sorcery, alchemy, and mind control. Ancient Sith holocrons preserved knowledge that even the Jedi found terrifying. These teachings included techniques to manipulate life energy, enhance physical abilities, or even drain the life force from enemies. The Sith embraced every form of power the galaxy offered, believing that strength was the ultimate measure of worth. One of the earliest and most legendary Sith leaders was King Adas, a ruler who united the Sith species under a single banner and drove back the Dark Jedi's enemies. He established the first Sith Code, a philosophy that would shape the Empire for generations. Power through strength, survival through cunning, and ambition as the ultimate virtue. This philosophy would echo through the centuries, influencing every Sith Lord who came after. As the Sith Empire expanded, it encountered the Galactic Republic. At first, the Republic dismissed these newcomers as a primitive species from the Outer Rim, unworthy of concern. But the Sith were not primitive. They were organized, disciplined, and deadly. They had armies trained in both technology and the Force, ships capable of devastating planetary defenses, and leaders who understood strategy and deception. Skirmishes with Republic forces were costly, and the Sith quickly earned a reputation as a dangerous power in the galaxy. The first major conflict between the Sith Empire and the Republic occurred thousands of years before the Clone Wars. It was a time of intrigue, massive battles, and the first glimpses of Sith cunning. While the Jedi fought valiantly, the Sith learned quickly. They discovered the value of deception, strategy, and surprise. Rather than rely solely on brute force, Sith Lords began to use spies, dark side rituals, and psychological warfare to gain advantages over their enemies. These early conflicts taught the Sith that patience and planning could achieve what sheer might could not. As centuries passed, the Sith Empire reached the height of its power. Sith Lords like Naga Sadow and Ludo Kresh became legends, wielding power that could rival entire Jedi fleets. Sadow, in particular, mastered the combination of dark side sorcery and military strategy, conquering entire star systems and threatening the Republic itself. He even attempted to use powerful ancient Sith rituals to open portals to other dimensions of the Force, seeking ways to extend his influence beyond the physical galaxy. However, the Empire was not without internal strife. Sith are ambitious by nature, and infighting was common. Masters sought to dominate apprentices, apprentices sought to surpass masters, and rival factions competed for power. These conflicts often weakened the Sith from within, a pattern that would repeat throughout history. The Sith learned that while power could conquer enemies, unity was fragile. The strongest would survive, but only through cunning and ruthlessness. During these centuries, the Sith developed a unique philosophy of darkness. Unlike the Jedi, who valued selflessness, peace, and balance, the Sith embraced passion, desire, and personal ambition. They believed the Force could be used to achieve personal goals, and that morality was a constraint that weakened potential. The Sith Code became their guiding principle. The strong gain power, the weak are oppressed, and through passion, strength is achieved. This ideology was passed down from master to apprentice, refined over generations, and became the foundation of every Sith empire that followed. The Sith also valued knowledge as power. Ancient Sith Lords created vast libraries of holocrons, recordings, and artifacts, each storing secrets of the dark side. These repositories preserved knowledge of sorcery, combat techniques, and political manipulation. Apprentices were required to study these holocrons extensively, learning the lessons of previous generations and building on them. The accumulation of knowledge allowed the Sith to adapt to new challenges, whether from Jedi opponents, rival Sith factions, or galactic events. Despite their power, the Sith Empire eventually faced decline. Wars with the Republic, Infighting among Sith and overreach in ambition led to its collapse. This collapse was dramatic, scattering surviving Sith across the galaxy. Some retreated to hidden worlds, others went into exile, and a few were hunted and destroyed by Jedi forces. These events taught the Sith that survival depended not just on strength but on secrecy, cunning, and the careful selection of apprentices. From the ashes of the old Sith Empire arose the concept of the Rule of Two, established thousands of years later by Darth Bane. Bane studied the failures of previous Sith, understanding that endless numbers of Sith led to infighting and destruction. He decreed that only a master and an apprentice would exist at any time, the master holding ultimate power, the apprentice learning and waiting. This rule ensured that the Sith could survive in secrecy and patiently rebuild their influence without self-destruction. But even before Bane, Sith philosophy continued to evolve. Sith lords experimented with dark side rituals, alchemy, and technology, learning how to manipulate life, the Force, and even the minds of others. They became scholars of power, understanding that the dark side was not just about anger or hatred, but about strategy, patience, and cunning. Each Sith apprentice was taught to surpass the master, to be ruthless, and to embrace the dark side fully. This early history of the Sith set the stage for the conflicts that would define the galaxy for millennia. Ancient empires, hidden apprentices, and secret cults created a legacy of darkness that would echo through the ages. Every Sith who came after, from Naga Sadow to Darth Sidious, drew lessons from these origins. Ambition must be tempered with strategy, power must be preserved, and the dark side is eternal, waiting for those who are patient and cunning enough to seize it. After the founding of the first Sith Empire on Coruscant, the Sith species and their Dark Jedi allies began to expand their power across the galaxy. What started as a small alliance of exiled Dark Jedi and native Sith evolved into a civilization built on conquest, strategy, and dark side mastery. The Sith learned to combine their natural force sensitivity with technology, military organization, and sorcery, creating a power that rivaled even the Galactic Republic. The first major Sith Empire was not a single, unified entity for long. While the Dark Jedi brought knowledge of the Force, strategy, and combat, the Sith species had its own ambitions and traditions. Disputes over leadership, philosophy, and strategy frequently erupted into open conflict. Early Sith rulers like King Adas sought unity, attempting to centralize power and establish codes of conduct. His creation of the early Sith Code laid the foundation for future Sith philosophy, emphasizing strength, ambition, and survival. The code also encouraged loyalty to the master, obedience to the strong, and the pursuit of personal power. Despite internal tensions, the Sith Empire grew. They explored nearby star systems, conquered weaker civilizations, and established colonies to supply their expanding armies. Ancient Sith fleets, armed with powerful warships, were accompanied by legions of soldiers trained in both conventional warfare and the dark side of the Force. Sith armies often combined technology and sorcery, using enchanted weapons, mind-controlled soldiers, and dark rituals to gain an advantage over enemies. These tactics made them formidable opponents for the Galactic Republic, which at the time considered the Sith a minor Outer Rim threat. The first significant conflict between the Sith and the Republic came during the reign of Sith Lord Naga Sadow, one of the most legendary figures in Sith history. Sadow was a master of sorcery, military strategy, and manipulation. He inherited a fragile empire, but his vision and cunning allowed him to expand it dramatically. Unlike previous Sith rulers, Sadow combined his military campaigns with advanced use of the dark side, attempting to influence populations, demoralize enemy forces, and even alter events across vast distances. Sadow's most ambitious campaign came during the Great Hyperspace War, a series of battles and political manipulations aimed at striking the Republic at its weakest points. Sadow believed that the Republic was vulnerable, divided by bureaucracy and overconfidence. He launched a surprise attack, striking multiple systems simultaneously and attempting to destabilize the Republic from within. Using Sith sorcery, he created illusions, summoned terrifying creatures, and even manipulated the minds of enemy commanders to cause confusion and defeat. While initially successful, Sado's expansion revealed a major weakness of the early Sith Empire: overreach. Ambition, while celebrated by the Sith, often led to disaster. The Republic mobilized massive fleets in response, aided by Jedi intervention. In addition, rival Sith factions began to challenge Sado's authority, leading to internal strife. Sado's greatest mistake was underestimating both his enemies and his own people's ambitions. Despite his brilliance, he could not maintain control over a sprawling empire filled with ambitious Sith lords, many of whom desired power for themselves. Among Sado's rivals was Ludo Kresh, another Sith lord whose philosophy emphasized discipline, order, and cautious expansion. Kresh opposed Sado's aggressive campaigns, believing that patience and consolidation were more effective than reckless conquest. Their conflict, both military and ideological, fractured the Sith Empire. Open battles between Sith factions weakened their forces, leaving them vulnerable to Republic counterattacks. The infighting highlighted a recurring theme in Sith history: unchecked ambition can destroy even the strongest empire. The Great Hyperspace War ended disastrously for the Sith. Naga Sado was forced to flee to the unknown regions with a portion of his loyal followers. His remaining forces on Korriban were defeated or killed, and the Republic reclaimed the lost systems. This defeat marked the first significant decline of the Sith Empire, but it did not destroy the Sith. Those who survived went into exile, hiding on distant worlds, and preserving the knowledge, power, and traditions of the Sith in secret. Even in defeat, Sado's influence persisted. Holocrons, texts, and artifacts from his era preserved knowledge of sorcery, strategy, and combat. Future Sith would study these relics, learning the lessons of both his brilliance and his failures. Sado's campaigns demonstrated the power of the dark side combined with strategy, but also the dangers of overambition and internal division. Every Sith who came after would learn that the galaxy could not be conquered through force alone. Cunning, patience, and secrecy were equally important. The collapse of the First Sith Empire gave rise to smaller, secretive Sith sections. Exiled Sith scattered across the Outer Rim and the unknown regions, training apprentices in isolation and preserving knowledge for future generations. These sects were often hidden in dangerous, remote locations, from desolate planets to ancient Sith tombs. Here, apprentices learned the ways of the dark side, practicing combat, sorcery, and manipulation under the watchful eyes of their masters. These hidden teachings ensured that the Sith would survive, even when their empires fell. During this time, the Sith also refined their philosophy. They studied the mistakes of the early empire, recognizing that the pursuit of power without discipline led to self-destruction. They began to embrace the principles that would later become central under Darth Bane's rule of two: secrecy, survival, and concentration of power in a single master-apprentice pair. This new approach minimized infighting, allowing the Sith to rebuild their strength quietly, patiently, and without exposing themselves to the Republic. Ancient Sith teachings emphasized more than combat. Sorcery, alchemy, and the manipulation of life were studied alongside political strategy and military tactics. Apprentices learned how to influence others subtly, create loyal followers, and manipulate events without revealing their presence. The Sith understood that the galaxy was a system of connections, and that indirect control could be more powerful than conquest through force. Every apprentice was taught to see beyond immediate battles, to understand the long game, and to cultivate power that would endure for generations. As centuries passed, remnants of the First Sith Empire became the foundation for new Sith civilizations. Some survived as secret orders, hidden on desolate planets, while others integrated with native species on distant worlds. These Sith preserved the teachings of Sado, Kresh, and other ancient masters, passing knowledge from one generation to the next. Their influence continued to ripple across the galaxy, preparing the way for later figures like Exar Kun, Revan, Malak, and ultimately Darth Bane, who would reshape the Sith into the powerful and secretive order known throughout the galaxy. Centuries after the fall of the First Sith Empires and the secretive resurgence of the Sith under Freedon Nad and Exar Kun, the galaxy faced a new threat, one from within the Sith themselves. The Sith had survived, but they had not yet solved a critical problem: infighting. Ambition, a core tenet of the dark side, had caused the downfall of countless Sith factions. Rivalries, betrayals, and civil wars repeatedly weakened their power, leaving them vulnerable to Jedi intervention. Into this fractured era stepped a Dark Lord who would redefine the Sith forever, Darth Bane. Unlike his predecessors, Bane was not content with temporary victories or small factions of loyal apprentices. He understood that the Sith, if left in numbers too great, would destroy themselves. Ambition, while a source of power, also bred betrayal. The lesson of the Great Hyperspace War, the infighting among the first Sith empires, and the hubris of Exar had become clear. Survival required discipline, secrecy, and a radical new philosophy. Darth Bane's rise began in hardship. Born in poverty on the planet Apatros, he witnessed firsthand the consequences of corruption, weakness, and betrayal. He was trained in the ways of the dark side early on, learning that strength alone was not enough. Strategy, cunning, and patience were just as critical. Bane quickly distinguished himself among other dark side users by his clarity of thought and ruthless focus. While many Sith fought each other for temporary advantage, Bane sought long-term survival and the eventual domination of the galaxy. The turning point came with Bane's realization that the Sith Order itself was inherently flawed. In the traditional Sith, countless apprentices and rival factions vied for power. Every master trained multiple apprentices, and every apprentice sought to surpass the master. This abundance of power often led to betrayal, civil war, and eventual destruction. Bane concluded that to survive, the Sith needed a new structure, one that concentrated power, preserved knowledge, and eliminated internal conflict. From this understanding, Bane established the Rule of Two, a revolutionary Sith philosophy. The rule stated, there would be only two Sith at a time, a master and an apprentice. The master would embody the accumulated power and knowledge of the Sith, while the apprentice would learn, grow stronger, and eventually challenge the master. If the apprentice succeeded, the master would die, and the apprentice would take on a new apprentice. This cycle ensured that the Sith remained strong, cunning, and focused, avoiding the internal strife that had destroyed their predecessors. Bane implemented the Rule of Two with meticulous care. He destroyed existing Sith factions that threatened the Order, purging any groups that could compromise secrecy or unity. Many fled or were killed, and Bane's small, concentrated order became the foundation of the modern Sith. His apprentice, Darth Zana, was trained in both combat and sorcery, embodying the rule's philosophy of concentration of power and patient accumulation of knowledge. Under Bane, the Sith transformed from a fractured army into a secretive, nearly undetectable order capable of influencing events across the galaxy without exposing themselves. The Rule of Two also changed the Sith's approach to conflict. Unlike the open warfare of Naga Sadow, Exar Kuan, or the ancient empires, Bane emphasized subtlety, manipulation, and long-term strategy. The Sith would no longer risk everything in large-scale battles. Instead, they would operate from the shadows, shaping galactic events, influencing political systems, and guiding ambitious individuals to serve their goals. Open confrontation would only occur when the Sith were strong enough to guarantee success. Bane also refined the philosophy of the dark side. Whereas earlier Sith often focused solely on passion, anger, and ambition, Bane emphasized the importance of patience, cunning, and mastery of knowledge. A Sith's strength was not only measured by combat ability but also by the ability to survive, learn, and manipulate the galaxy's systems over generations. This intellectual approach allowed the Sith to endure for centuries, even in apparent obscurity. During this period, the Sith became true shadows in the galaxy. Hidden temples, secret apprentices, and scattered holocrons preserved knowledge for the next generation. Bane's teachings emphasized the long game. Apprentices were trained not to dominate immediately but to grow, learn, and wait for the perfect opportunity to strike. The galaxy might see no Sith for decades or even centuries, but the Order remained alive, patient, and dangerous. Bane also understood the importance of legacy. He left behind holocrons filled with his teachings, detailing not only combat techniques and sorcery but also the philosophy and strategy that would allow future Sith to survive. These holocrons became treasured artifacts for apprentices across the galaxy, ensuring that the rule of two would endure long after Bane's death. Xana, his apprentice, became a master in her own right, training her own apprentice and continuing the cycle. The rule of two ensured the Sith's survival through centuries of Jedi dominance. While the Jedi trained thousands of students openly, the Sith trained only 2 at a time, hidden in secrecy. This small number allowed them to avoid detection and outlast centuries of conflict. The rule also ensured that every Sith apprentice was the product of generations of accumulated knowledge, creating individuals of unparalleled cunning, power, and patience. Bane's influence also reached beyond philosophy and structure. He emphasized the use of Sith alchemy, sorcery, and manipulation of the Force as essential tools for survival. Sith were taught to bend energy, dominate minds, and manipulate events with subtlety. Knowledge became as powerful as a lightsaber, and secrecy was considered a weapon in itself. Through these teachings, the Sith became more than warriors. They became strategists, scholars, and manipulators of history. After Bane, the Sith continued in secrecy, following the rule of two for thousands of years. Masters and apprentices moved in the shadows, shaping events in the galaxy without exposing themselves. Some influenced political leaders, others manipulated trade and economics, and a few tested the Jedi directly. Yet all adhered to Bane's principle: power concentrated in two, patience above all, and knowledge preserved across generations. Bane's philosophy endured because it solved the critical flaw of earlier Sith: infighting. While ancient Sith empires fell due to betrayal, overreach, and civil war, the rule of two allowed the Sith to survive in obscurity, building strength patiently. Over centuries, this structure allowed them to rise again at the perfect moment, culminating in the eventual return of figures like Darth Sidious, whose knowledge, patience, and cunning embodied the principles Bane established.